to the Level Up and Live podcast, where we equip you with the tools to level up and live your best life, personally and professionally. I'm your host, Sean Myers, joined by my co-host, Ewan. Today, we're diving deep into a crucial topic, trust. We'll be uncovering the 5 key essentials that lay the foundation for trust in life and business. Get ready for some enlightening insights and practical tips that will help you build stronger connections and foster trust in both your personal and professional life.
So this is going to be a special episode today. We're pivoting away from what we were going to do because what we're going to talk about today is super important. Sean has been reading a book called Trust. We're going to we'll put this on social media. You can see what it looks like. The cover is super cool, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. It's a cool title, and it's by Dr. Henry Cloud. And so we all know what trust is. We know what it feels like. We know what it is to have trust in someone. But me and Sean were talking, and he was really saying a number of things that I had said. He's like, all true. Some of that is surface level. And I'm like, okay, I'm very curious. What do you mean? So he's like, well, let's get into the book. And so we start talking about it, and we're like, well, let's do the episode on this, right? It's that important. Without trust, life is a raw nerve that you're constantly on, constantly looking over your shoulder. Life is not enjoyable when you don't have a foundation of trust in the important areas of life, whether it's your business, your spouse, your friends, anything that revolves around needing someone else, relying on somebody else. Trust is just a massive issue. We're social beings, and we are constructed around it. Right. So this is such an important deal. If there's any area of life and you think this might not apply to you, this is all encompassing. This goes very, very deep and can improve all areas of your life. So hang tight with us on this. We're going to be going over 5 points. And Sean, take it away, man. Why was it such an impactful book for you?
Yeah, so I'm about halfway through this book, and man, my heart has just been singing, right? My soul's lit up, my mind's lit up, and here I am at 37 on, April 2024, just going like, when you think you have it all figured out, you don't, right? Life happens in mysterious ways, and for me, it's like with the North Star, right? It's becoming the best version of yourself. It's like, what areas of my life can I improve on? Can I work on? Can I dive deeper on? And a mentor once shared with me is like, instead of focusing on, 100 different things, focus on 3 or 4 different things, right? And just get so good at that, align it with your beliefs and your values. And so, well, what is like the key ingredient to life? Like if we apply it in every single area of our life, what key ingredient? Team members, spouse, business partners. When you fly a plane, when you go on a plane, who do you trust? The airline pilot. You never met that guy in the first place. The pilot, you never met that guy, but you're trusting him, right? So trust shows up in every single area of our life. And without it, right, then where would we be? And so to me, for 35 plus years, I've always looked at trust as a surface level, like, oh yeah, I trust that. I trust the pilot. Obviously he knows what he's doing. He's been going to school. He's done this, he should be an expert at it. He's done it 10,000 hours. I trust him. I'm just relinquishing that trust. Well, what's fascinating is when you dive deeper on trust, like I have in this book from Dr. Henry Cloud, he goes into detail on the 5 key essentials of trust. Well, when you dive deep on these 5 key essentials of trust, and these stories that we'll be sharing with you, is that it allows you to dissect and reflect on your own life and go, okay, where am I struggling, and how does this show up in my marriage? How does this show up with my business partner? How does this show up with my team members? Because you may be listening to this and you have no trust at all. I know some people that don't trust anybody, right?
You think they know it?
No. Well,
they don't know it.
They do and they don't. And what I mean by that is like they do to a certain degree. They, like, for instance, what I mean by that, in the book, he goes into detail. When I shared the plane, Dr. Henry Cloud got on a plane, had the individual sit next to him, and the individual struck up a conversation and said, hey, what do you do for a living? And Dr. Henry Cloud was like, well, I, didn't really wanted to read his book or do something else, right? But he said, well, it's fascinating is he went ahead and, like, the God was, or in spirit frequency, he went ahead and shared what he did. He's a psychologist. And then the guy was like, oh, you're one of those. And then I guess they had got on the subject of trust, and the guy's like, oh, I don't trust anybody. And Dr. Henry Cloud goes, well, oh, that's interesting. What makes you say that? Well, and then he went to share like why he doesn't trust anybody. He goes, so you're sitting next to me. Who's driving the plane? The pilot. So there's a sense of trust there, right? Yeah, right. Oh, what about the baggage? Did you bring carry-ons? Yeah. Okay. So you trust the people that were handling your baggage to go from this state to this state? Yeah. So there's a sense of trust there, right? And so what I mean by that, some do and some don't. There is a certain degree of surface level of trust, right? And there's a certain degree, like this gentleman, he didn't understand. Like he was putting trust in the pilot. He was putting trust in the luggage,
And he didn't
but
know it.
he didn't know it. And to the other degree, he was like, no, I don't trust people. So going into the key essentials of trust is it dives deep and allows you to have these five key ingredients, what allows you to understand trust and what, because that's the key to life, man, is in trust in everything. We're on this podcast virtual studio today. We're trusting that the internet doesn't fail. We're trusting that
Man,
I'm
I hadn't
trusting
even
that you.
thought about that, dude. Like, I hadn't thought about, like, yeah, the level. I'm trusting the seat I'm sitting on, like, to not fall down and break. Like, I assume the nuts and bolts are gonna hang together. I'm just
Yeah.
trusting that.
Exactly. And that's and again, what's so fascinating is we don't get taught this stuff, but without trust, where are we? And so when you dive deeper on this, it sheds the light on why the statistics are so high when it comes to marriages and why they fail, and why business partners and ships and partnerships don't work out, is because these five key essentials that we'll be sharing with you today. And the first one is that I'll segue into is understanding, right? When you partner up with somebody, when you start a business, when you say yes, I do, to marry that individual, to marry your spouse, there is a sense of trust, right? And so this first one is, do you have an understanding of each other? And it dives deep on it, and I know you've got some thoughts on this, but for me, from what I've learned from the understanding of the trust is, where is this person? Is there an understanding of like the agreement of the contract? Is there an understanding of this pilot flying the plane? Right. And so that's the first essential key component of trust. It's not all five of them, it's the first one. So when you have trust, you have to have this key ingredient. Number one, essential, is understanding, because you can have these other four that we're going to be sharing with you.
So how would you tell someone from the book that you read, like, how would you help someone to do that first point, like to understand what's some of the key elements of understanding that they would need to have to um, be proficient at the understanding portion?
Yeah, you got to pick up the book to find out.
I love that.
We'll have to talk. We'll have to tag Dr. Henry Cloud on this one to,
Yeah,
to
we
dive
will.
deep.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating though when they dive deep on the understanding. Is a key component. And in the book, obviously, it goes into detail. And I'm speaking for Dr. Henry Cloud now. But in general, to answer your question, there has to be a mutual understanding. Right? Is like when you, for instance, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner and you hire a team member, is there an understanding? You come in here, is your job to sell or service? Right? If you're thinking you're coming into service, but you're selling, well, there's not an understanding. So guess what? There's a lack of trust.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
see?
you'd have to have the understanding of um, the elements of it, like integrity, honesty, right? Like understanding, are these elements involved for me to be able to place trust, right? And it's not maybe something you think consciously about. Is it? It's like perhaps it's a feeling, perhaps it's past experience. Like there'd have to be some evidence, right? But those elements would have to be there first. Yeah, honesty, integrity, honor, right? Like for me, if I'm going to understand to go into a business relationship or my spouse, right? Like what do I know? What do I understand about the agreement we're about to get into?
100%.
That would be for me something I would think. Those are some key elements, right? I'm understanding that is what is required. Without it, it wouldn't work.
Yeah. And these are pillars, right? These are the essentials of trust. It's not just understanding, right? But that's the first one. That's the first step. That's the first essential. When you got in, when me and you said, let's partner up. Well, what was the understanding? Well, the understanding is, hey, here's our North Star. Here's our macro. Here's our vision. Here's what we're trying to do together. Here's why we're partnering up. Here's what we want to do. Here's an idea. So there was an understanding to a certain degree, right? Of both agreeing to get on the same page. What time, what, what is our time that we're going to be allowing to build this business during the week? So there's an understanding there. There's an understanding of delegating when we brought on other team members that they were going to be doing social media and reaching out to guests. And there was an understanding of responsibilities up front, right? And so you're not going to have all the answers, but there needs to be an understanding.
It's the beginning of a healthy connection.
Yes, exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
So once you have the understanding, did you have any final, any thoughts on that before we go
No,
into number
man. I
two?
think it leads right in really well into the second point, which is motive. What is what is the what is someone seeking out of this, right? Because if there's two parties involved, there has to be, for it to have trust, there could be a minimum of two people involved, right? Because one person is trusting in the other and vice versa. And so yeah, what is the motive, the intention? What does that one person want to get? Because it might be different than the other person's, right? It might be the same, and maybe it doesn't even have to be the same, right? But as long as the intentions are good, like what was in the book? Did you take away from the motive perspective?
Yeah. So in general, I mean, so in summary, it's basically like you said it's what is the intentions? What is the motive here? And so when you partner up, when your spouse, right? It's like when I think about motive, two different examples. If you have somebody, we've heard the word gold digger, right? You've heard the word, if a woman goes to a wealthy man and she's not working and she goes to a wealthy man, well, what's the motive there, right? So they may have the understanding of like, hey, I'll be your spouse, I'll make you happy, blah, blah, blah. But then the second essential is, okay, well, if you're failing, if your motive is different than that other man's, if that man's like, hey, I want you, there's an understanding here. We're happy. We're both happy. We make each other happy. We have similar values, all these other things, right? But if her deep down internal core it is a different motive, like it's only a matter of time before he's a ticking time bomb, he falls over, I'm going to get all his wealth. What's the motive there, right? So there's a broken trust because of the motive. Same thing
Because
in a partnership.
one is one is selfish, right? Their motive is for them. What do they
Yes.
get, right? As opposed to um, selflessness, right? My intention for them, my intention for you is a good intention. I'm doing this for my reasons, but partnering up with someone or anyone, even spouse, right? I want the very best. That's a key element to me. Like my motive would have to be, because if it was just about me and me alone, I don't really care about what anybody else thinks, then that's not going to work for long, right? Because it's going to
Right.
show up. So you'd have to have an element of yeah, I want the very best for the person that I'm getting into a relationship with, like
Yeah,
that
it has to
connection.
be equally like what you always do, right? If you're
Yes.
watching this on video on YouTube, you're doing this together, right? You're not clashing, you're doing this. So if you have the understanding, okay, cool. The second essential, the motive. If you're both like on positive vibes, on healthy motives, right? Then those two, then you're building the pillars there, you're building the foundation. But this can go in any area of life, right? Like, so another thing that I think of is like when I was hired initially to come in to when I was terminated from Enterprise Rent a Car, and then I put my resume on Indeed and ZipRecruiter, and then I was recruited to come in and work for the State Farm agent. There was an understanding. You're going to get an office. You're going to make $25,000 a year. You're going to sell this much. These are your goals. And there was an understanding. So that was the first level of trust. Okay, cool. So I felt good, right? The second one was, what's the motive here as the State Farm agent? If you put yourself in the State Farm agent's shoes, well, the motive is he wants me to come in here and sell, build his agency, right? And I'm not speaking, I don't want to speak, I don't want to speak, I don't want to speak out of like those are his language, but I'm just giving an example. That could be the motive of somebody that's hiring a salesperson or a service person. There's an understanding there, and then what's the real motive behind here? Because what you said, Ewan, is, Well, Sean, I want you to come in here and I want to pour my heart and soul into you, impact and serve and get you to where you want to be. That is my motive. My motive is not I want you to come in here and build my dream, sell, sell, sell.
That does not
So,
work.
so I can retire, right?
Yeah.
It's only going to be a ticking time bomb. And then the trust gets lost.
It's a selfish motive. It's
It
a
is a
hidden,
selfish motive.
it's almost it
And it
could
can
be
be hidden.
a hidden agenda.
Yes. It can be hidden.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this and you look at where you work right now, look at your supervisor, look at your manager, look at the owner, and dissect these essentials and ask yourself, is there an understanding? Typically there is. What is the motive behind the owner? What is the motive behind the manager and the supervisor? Do you really know? Well, if I'm you, I'm listening to this, I'm finding out the motive. What's
Mhm.
the motive behind all this?
The irony behind it all is that you take you're going to you're going to sell for me to build my dream so I can retire. The irony is that attitude, that mindset, that motive is counterintuitive to the very goal that he is trying to get, or she, as opposed to, if I am putting all into you and my motive is for you to succeed at all
Yes.
costs. Well, what's going to
Yes.
happen to me if you succeed at all costs? Yes, it's all going to rocket up. Like
That's right.
my as a leader,
Yes.
you don't look down and tell people what to do and how to do it, as we know, who not how. You bring people in to do the how, and get the very best out of them to be able to perform that, right, so that they get all that they need out of it. Because if they're doing that, it's very fulfilling. And if they're fulfilled and the trust is there, that is when loyalty is built and confidence is built. And what happens with all those things? Positivity, right? Sales, which means the revenue grows, which means he's one step closer to retiring, which is nothing wrong with that. Build his business, right? That's what any business owner would want, to
100%.
build a business.
Yes.
But it's just a totally different perspective. If that's his focus as a leader, that's not it's not going to lead you very far. It's not going to lead to anything great anyway.
Yeah, there's a lack of, because like I told you before the podcast episode today, you can have 4 essentials, but if there's a missing pillar, well, what happens to the foundation? It's very rocky, right? And so if you find out somebody's motive and you've been there and they're not, and it's that small tweak, it's that small adjustment of like, okay, what's really driving their behavior, their actions? What's the motive? Do they really want to serve and impact? And for me, it's like I can watch their actions, right? That's how I find out like what is their motive here.
Yeah, and I guess from the opposite perspective of that, as the owner of a business, right? When you're hiring and interviewing someone, you're really trying to find that motive. As an entrepreneur, what's some of the key elements? How can you decipher someone's motive? I mean, of course, they're going to be saying things. Everybody shows up very well in an interview, or they're going to tell their boss what they want to hear so they can keep their job. But do you have any instances where you could think where you see the motive, but it doesn't line up with what they're saying? Is you ever like kind of what do you lean on to be able to decipher that? And then also, how do you know when the motive is true?
Yeah, man, simple. 2 things. So, one, if you're early stages and you're listening to this, right, you've got the upper hand. And what I mean by that is like you can go to this if you're applying for a position or if you're an employee or you've got a manager, supervisor. My type of personality is that I'm asking that question out of kind and love. Out of curiosity, I haven't asked this in the past several years but I was listening to this podcast and audio, and this may sound completely out of the left field, but if you don't mind me asking, what's your motive here on hiring me? And shut up, excuse my language, but let them answer, because you're going to see their motor skills start thinking, what's your motive here? I want you to come in and sell. Well, right then and there what their motive is. That, what they just said, I want you to sell. That speaks volume. But if they say, you know what, and they share a story, and I really like your resume, your qualifications, your persistency, the referrals that have been sent to me, you have similar values to mine, and I want to serve and impact and get you to where you want to be. I want to help you meet your goals. I want to do everything in my power to help you become the best version of yourself. If you start speaking that volume, that that is a motive, right? And so that is a pillar. But when you ask, that's the first one is like, hey, what's the motive here? And what better ways to ask somebody that? The second thing is, Ewan, is I'm a big believer in like, don't listen to what I say, watch what I do. Right? So you want to tell somebody's motive, like watch what they do, right? Do they support you? Do they show up for you? Do they encourage you? Do they high five you? Do they try to help meet your goals? They can't do the job for you. They can't do the goals for you. They can't do the work for you, but the motive, the actions should align, right? Like, are their actions meeting what they're saying? So watch their actions versus what they say. Those are my two tips.
And that rolls really well into the third point, which is ability, right? Because to be able to watch their actions, they'd have to have a level of competency, the ability to align, to show up, to execute on what the trust, the agreement, the connection is, right? Because if they can't do it, right, is that if they don't have the skills or knowledge, then they're going to fall short of that trust every time if they're not able to comply, right? Like if they're not holding up their end of the bargain. Yeah, in the book, does he go into on ability? What was some of the thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, it really hit home with me and kind of reflected in my own life when this third key essential is ability, right? When you partner up with somebody, when you marry somebody, say I do, when you bring on a team member on board, the third key essential, you can have understanding, you can have motive, but does this person have ability? And what I mean by that is, if I'm good in this area of life, and these are my strengths, these are my flaws, struggles, I've done the dark work, I've done the work, but they haven't done the work behind the scenes like I have. Do they have the ability to come into this role? Let me give you an example. If I'm a founder of a company and I'm like, I want to move on, I want to step away from my CEO role and I want to hire a CEO. Well, there can be an understanding between me, the founder, and the CEO. There can be a motive. Hey, we're both aligned with our motive, right? On why you're wanting to come in here. But as a founder, if I miss not seeing that this CEO or this partner doesn't have the ability to be a CEO, maybe he came up from a CFO or COO. Those are completely two different chief executive officer versus chief operations officer. Two different, similar skill sets, but very different. If that CEO comes up to that CEO role and the founder doesn't understand the trust and the ability in this person, the CEO, to run the company. And what I mean by that is, let me dive a little deeper with you. So what I mean by not having the ability, if the CEO role comes into there, as a founder, I want the CEO to come to me and be a no man. I don't want a yes man. I don't need a CEO in the seat saying, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, sounds good.
Slippery slope.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by ability in our own lives, right? Is this person's ability that comes into this role? Does he have the ability to tell you yes or no? And if
Mm.
he doesn't, that's going to cause problems in the future. It will. It'll
And the
show up.
ability to say no the right way, because it could be a complete disaster if they don't have the ability to position it well, like to help that founder or the CEO and the founder together to make an agreement, to disagree together, right? To look at, well, the reason I'm saying no on this is because of X and because of this, as opposed to,
Yes.
no, it's not a good idea. Let's not do it.
100%.
And if it's challenged, then it goes south, right? Because they don't know how to navigate it, right? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
ability once again.
Yes, absolutely, man. Well said. And think about it in our marriages, in our spouses. If we don't, we can have an understanding when we say I do, and then we can have both have the same motive, right? We want to grow old together. We want to work on, plug ourselves into church and have kids, and we can have the same motives, right? Healthy motives. But if we don't have the ability, for instance, right? Love my parents to death. They had the understanding, they had a good motive, wanted to raise kids, but one had the ability and one didn't have the ability. When they picked their head up at 28 years of life, one had the ability to keep growing, one didn't, right? So why are the statistics so high when it comes to the failure? It's because there's a loss of trust in this pillar, the ability to be able to be the husband or be the wife in the marriage, right?
Yeah.
We're doing the episode that's rolling out this Thursday is the 5 key ingredients, right, on not taking your wife for granted. Well, do both have the ability to grow within their marriage? And if you don't, right, then what happens? It's a recipe for disaster. There is a loss of trust
Yeah.
in not having the ability.
And they might not have done it before, the experience, because there's always going to be the moment before you have the ability to do something, but having the potential to do that thing, right? To show that you have the characteristics, the temperament, the motive to take whatever that thing is on and do a good job, right? Have the ability to execute, which you'd like to see a track record, right? And especially on the higher up the level you go, right? You'd want to see, have they done it before? Do they have the ability, and can they prove it to me? But there's always going to be those elements, especially in a relationship. Well, we haven't been here before, so we don't know if we have the ability, but we do have the intention, we do have the emotive, we do have the communication, like all the other things we've talked about, like the understanding, and that is all required to have the ability to do something, right? And then
Yeah,
once you're done, you'd have that experience, and on to the next thing,
yeah. Well, I think about it in marriage, like if your spouse doesn't have the ability to show up, plug themselves in, be resilient, determined that to make this work, if they don't have the ability to have that resilience, that fortitude, that persistence, that consistency, right? What happens? You miss this pillar, you miss this one key essential to trust. We all
Mm-hmm.
know it's hard to become an optimal, it's hard to become and grow in your marriage, right? If you lose that one key essential to trust in that ability. Think about it. You can have the understanding, the motive, but if they don't have the ability to keep showing up and doing these things when it gets tough, what happens? Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with a business partner, same thing with an employee, right? Same thing with podcasting, bringing on guests onto the show. If they don't have the ability to have that resilience, that fortitude, when the times get tough to do it anyways, when you don't feel like it, here's your answer. Here's your actions.
And that's why you date. Dating is like the long form interview, right? Like in business, you have, depends on how many interviews you have, but I know that I've seen where there's up to 9 interviews, and there's a reason for it, is because they really want to make sure who they're getting involved with is the right person. So it's
Yes.
worth slower, hire slow and fire fast, right? That's the old saying, right? And same with dating, is like you have to really find out about this person, spend the time, take your time, no rushing, because it's that important. You're gonna spend the rest of your life together, no point in rushing, right? And in that dating period, you're going to find out, do they have the ability, at least the potential to have the ability to work out difficult situations, right? To level up, to go to the next level. Yeah, that's why we take time, and we really have to get to know someone to have that trust. Deeper the trust, man, the longer you're gonna have to spend to have the evidence of they've proven it now, right? Like, I trust them. You can't trust someone you just met. You just can't, because you don't know. You'd
I
have
asked
to
you that
build that.
before the podcast, if trust can be given or earned, and you said both. And my thought, it has to be earned,
Mm,
right? Trust has to be earned. I
yeah,
mean, these things, there has to be understanding. What's the motive? Because if you just give, what you're saying is, if you just give, then that means that you don't know their motive,
yeah. Well,
right?
I
You
think
have
I
to you
think
have to
that
earn
the
it.
time for me on that, you someone has to earn it, but the other person has to give it, right? It has to be given, because someone might see what they see, and it's enough to know, all right, I trust them. I'm going to give them my trust now. Like, because there's always that defining moment of, I trust that person. I've given trust to them. But yes, it is a requirement to have earned it, to some degree, and depending on the level of trust you're giving someone, right? If it's someone at Starbucks making the coffee, well, I'm going to give them my trust that they're going to make that coffee. Not a big deal, right? I'm just going to give it right away because it's a small thing. But marriage, business partner, a customer, right? Going to be in dealing with them for many years to come, spending millions of dollars. Yeah, we're going to want to. It's going to be a minute before they give you that trust. You have to prove it through your actions, right? And so, yeah,
Exactly.
there's earning and giving, and I guess that's the whole goal. The person is earning to get it, and the person is watching them to give it, right? And so once those stipulations are made, then the agreement is, yeah, because that's one thing. Can one person trust when the other person doesn't? Does trust exist? We hadn't really thought about. I hadn't discussed that. Like,
Well,
oh, I trust this person, but they don't trust me.
yeah.
That's an odd situation. I hadn't really pondered that, but
Well, think about how it shows up, like what I shared with you before the podcast. Think about an airline pilot and the guy that's sitting in the seat
mm,
the guy sitting in the seat doesn't trust anybody.
yeah, that's right.
The pilot, well, in theory, right? Like you're sitting in the seat, but you don't know the pilot. So there is a sense of trust there, right? And you might not have all the key essentials. You may not have, all these key essentials, all five of them listed out, but there is like you said, going through the coffee drive through. It is what it is.
Mm,
If you want to get a cup of coffee, you're gonna have to go through. There has to be a sense of trust. But to the pilot, it's like he doesn't even know this guy, right? So
mm,
there's a sense of trust that this guy is not a terrorist,
yeah.
right? That everybody did their job from TSA all the way through. So trust is everything.
And look what happens when people get on planes. They start freaking out. There's always that, oh, what if we crash? What if we don't? So there's that is, man, metaphorically speaking, like, you could have that if the trust, you don't know, right? You have to just trust them. You have to let go of control on those ones, right? And just trust. But it's nerve wracking, right? Like, there's a leap of faith there to some degree. And if you've done your due diligence, right? And I'm not talking about being on a plane here, but if you've done the due diligence, I feel like I have enough information to let go of being defensive, being on the defensive, being in control. I've seen enough now to trust them. They've proven it, and so I now give it to them. And
Exactly.
and you do that before that moment, yeah, you're gonna be constantly like holding on white knuckles, like on the on the plane. You're like, we're gonna crash, even though that's not gonna do anything. Like, there's nothing you can do at that moment. You're in the air, right? Um, but yeah, it's definitely a sequence. But yeah, and so that leads us into point 4, character. It forms the foundation of trust. Everything we're talking about, right? Like evidence, right? I'd have to see what kind of character does this person have. Like, what traits are they showing me? What is valuable to them? What's their values? What's their virtues? And then, yeah, it would be, does their actions align with what they say?
Exactly, man. Yeah, and the beautiful thing about this, everything that you're saying this is all next level stuff. So if somebody's watching this, if somebody's listening to this, you're ahead of the crowd, right? There's a competitive advantage here. If you if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, spouse, entrepreneur, and you're listening to this, you're ahead of the game, and you apply this in your own life, because all it's going to do is just greater your chances of not having things blow up in your face, right? Down the road in marriage, business, whatever it may be. I'm sitting here at 37, Ewan, and going, I'm reading this and my jaw's just dropping.
Mm.
I'm like, trust is everything. And if it's everything, right, then why aren't we like, this should be the law
Yeah, yeah.
to read this in schools. And why is that important? Because I think from my experience, it would really help the due diligence in the earning of the trust in these key essentials, like you said, like if you partner with somebody or if you say yes to somebody as far as your spouse and their character's one thing, I think he talks about it, he references in the book, he goes into, it makes no sense to him when couples get married in 6 months.
Mm.
When they say I do in 6 months, you can't find out enough about people,
No
much
way.
less their character,
Yeah.
right? In 6 months. And so it has to be earned, right? Like, what is their character when things go bad, ugly, good? what is that? What is that? How's that character show up? The beliefs, the values. When are you reactionary? Are you proactive? And one of the things when I was reading this book, I'm like, man, reflecting it and dissecting it in my own life. And the beautiful thing about it is these things, if you're aware and you're intentional about it, you can work on these things, right?
Mm,
Like for me, at 37, what if a business partner or somebody wanted to partner up with me knowing my character 5 years ago? Probably
mm,
not,
mm.
right?
Agreed. Same for me too. I mean, yeah, I think that would have to be true. Like, yeah, that's always going to be true up until the moment that it's not, right? Once you've worked on it and proven it to someone else, because again, you have to have two to have trust.
Yeah.
Um, and what
But that's
characteristics would you work on for yourself? Have you worked on, and then what characteristics have you looked for, maybe innately in someone else that you're like, that's it, like how does someone do that?
Yeah, I mean, so it really comes down to like the moral character, right? It's like maybe they're not. For me, it's I know this person's not perfect. It's an imperfect action taker, but are they working on making things right?
Mm,
Right? Honesty, transparency, genuineness, kindness, compassion. Are they working on becoming the best version of themselves? Or are they just stuck in their ways going, nope, can't teach an old dog new tricks. It is what it is. You don't like it, you're
like
not in my life.
resistance, like hey, I saw this, and hey, if you did that, they're like, no, I'm good. Or even they even come for help, like, hey, I'm struggling with this, I need to do that, and you say, hey, how about this, how about that? No, that's not going to work. Like, that would be an indication of character to you right there, or what would you? Yeah, because that would hit me too. I'm like, this person is not in a place to the character of humility, the character of trying to hear what somebody else says and find out where it does fit for me, right?
Well, and also too, yeah. I mean, everybody. It's different for everybody, right? Everybody's got a different character, and so for me, it's like in my like think about your marriage, right? How does Kel show up in her character, right? When things go south in your marriage,
Yeah.
how does she portray what she says, right? And so she can have all these other things, but if her character lacks thereof, whatever that may be, in her beliefs and her actions and who she's trying to become as far as a wife for you, then there's a lack of trust on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being like you have all these things executed, but then you miss one where you're missing 25%. So there's a small sense of lack of trust there because of the
Mm,
character, because of how she's showing up. Same thing in our marriages or business partnerships. Like, how's the character showing up right now? And subconsciously, see, we don't think about it consciously, like, oh man, yeah, these 5 key essential trusts. That's why it hits home so hard, because when you
mm,
break it down, like, man, I can see why this is like the wrapping. This is the bow on the present, right? It's like
mm,
what it. You can have all these other things, understanding, motive, ability, but when not if when things go south, and they will, how do they show up,
yeah.
right? And so that can be different for everybody.
And that really
And
brings it back down to the intention, right? The motive.
yeah,
If someone's motive for that person initially is selfless, right? Like, I am my intention, my motive is selfless.
yes,
I am bought into making sure this other person is going to succeed, even at maybe at my own cost, right? Like, that is the person I want to be around, right? Because
yes.
that is reciprocal. Like, if they're doing that, what am I going to do? Man, they do that for me. Pff, let me up. I'm going to one up you. I'll do even more, right? So,
Well, I want to dovetail off that, you and I think this is important because, and if somebody listening to this are like, oh man, I struggle with that
mm,
character, or maybe it's motive or ability, right? If they're, and even myself included, I'm talking to myself right now, is like, okay, I may struggle with one of these. So where does this show up in other people when they trust me? Because they don't know. See, that's the thing. If you're listening to this,
hmm
like we started out originally on this episode, is yeah, I trust you. But when you dissect this on the pilot, is there an understanding? What's the motive of the pilot? Well, do we really know? No. But when you think about it, you're like, well, crap. What is the motive?
hmm
What's this
hmm
pilot? Where's he going to take us? Right? Maybe he's getting paid to do something. All these, right? And so I think it's sometimes easier to go, and here's my point. It's easier to go, yeah, I trust them when you're getting married and you say I do after knowing them for 6 months, or a business partnership and you haven't known the guy for less than 12 months, but he comes out of the blue and he seems like a good character and he's got all these good referrals. But are you checking these things off the box? What's his motive? What's his ability? What's his character when things get tough? See, that's my point. That's the dark work. That's the deep work. If you can do these things, these 5 essentials of trust, dude, you're going to go from that, 20% to 50% to 90, 95%
Yeah.
of pretty much having it all earned. Like you've earned all this by being patient and making sure these things are checked.
Yeah, man, it makes me think of the old saying, trust but verify. They're
Yeah.
like, well, if you trust me, you don't need to check. No, that's not always how trust works, right? Like, especially at the beginning stages. Well, it's better to give trust than not give trust. To me anyway. But there's different levels of giving that, right? If you want a deep level of my trust, well, there's gonna be a lot of verification going on there. But if I just met you, I would give someone the benefit of the doubt because that's a good beginning to a relationship. But it's going to be a short leash, right? And I would expect them to do the same with me because they don't know me, right? But I would want them to trust me because, well, for me, I feel like I'm a trustworthy person. But even if I didn't, let's say there's areas where I don't, um, I would want them to at least have that trust. Because if I felt like they didn't, that's going to be, I don't know if it would be a difficult relationship, right? Like, oh man, I don't feel trusted. How can I open up? How can I be myself, right? How could I do whatever? But at the same time, you'd have to verify, right? So because you can't just trust and then just hope. You can't trust and hope. Like I guess there's a time and place for that when you have no alternatives. Man, that's on a flight. To be honest, for me, it's like I trust and I'm just hoping here. Like, I mean, there's only so much verification I can do on this guy. I'm just hoping that my trust is placed in the right place. But business partnership and relationship, that yeah, you're going to start off small and it's going to grow until that moment where you're like, man, I trust them so much. I'm going to give, like, the guard is down. I'm going to really open up. But yeah, it's not always easy to do.
No, it's not. I think that's what I mean, it's like we do hard things, right? And that's what Level Up and Live is all about, is challenging ourselves to continuing to level up, how do you become the best version of yourself? How do you become the optimal version of yourself? Before you listen to this episode and these 5 key essential trusts, to me, you just became 1% better than you were, 35 minutes ago or 40 minutes
Mm.
ago. Is
Mm.
because now you have a deeper understanding of like what trust is, because trust is what makes the world go around. And
Mm.
if you can apply, sure, like when you get on a plane or you go through a drive through and get coffee, or you're trusting these people, you know, to take you, to where it is that you want to go or give you what you want. But but you can really apply this trust, and it needs to be earned, is when you partner up with somebody, or maybe you are hiring a landscape company, or you're hiring somebody to do $30,000 on a pool. Well, you're hiring somebody that's going to have $100,000 pool. This owner could have an understanding, the motive. He wants to get you a pool and make you happy. He can have the ability, he can have the character, but leading into our 5th one and the final one, track record.
Mm.
If you go back and look at his track record and you ask him, "Hey, what's your track record?" "Oh, I just started my pool company last month."
Hmm.
What what are you going to do now
Yeah.
as an
How
owner?
can you verify anything, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not paying 100. My point is, I'm not paying $100,000 that with nobody. He doesn't have a track record. There's
Yeah.
no customers. There's no testimonies. I'm not going to be his guinea pig at $100,000. That's my
Mm.
point. You
Hmm.
see, now we'll go out and get some customers, and you can come back to me. That's my decision. You may make that different call, but for me, you have to earn that. You have to get this track record, right? And of course, I'm speaking all this right now because I've read the book. I'm doing the work behind the scenes. 3 days ago, I'm probably saying, I like this guy, like, come on in. But
Yeah.
now that I know this stuff and applying it in my own life, it's just how I live my life. I'm like, oh, where do I need to make tweaks moving forward,
Mm.
on looking at track records?
What's interesting, is I'm thinking to that guy though. He's never done a pool before, but he could be excellent. We don't know. it is on him. It's his responsibility to go to someone that does trust him, right? Because imagine I came at you and like, Sean, I've never built a pool before, but I am giving you my word. It will be the best freaking pool that's ever been built. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to this guy, this guy, this guy. I'm going to hire these people. I'm going to use this quality of product. I'm going to have these people test it all out. There's going to be people auditing all the things as we go. And the finished product is going to look like this. And my word is on it. If it's not what it's going to be, I'm going to give you this back. Right? If it's me, there's an element where you might trust me. I would never do this because I wouldn't trust myself. Right? As an achiever, right, type 3, I believe I would do the best pool in the world, man. And it would be excellent. You could eat your breakfast off of it, right?
You definitely would.
Yeah.
But look, because here's my thing. Iron sharpens iron. The reason you came to me, this is important. Listen to this. The reason you came to me with that plan, 100% money back guarantee, Sean, I'm gonna spell it all out for you, is because I brought it up. Hey, man, I just read a book, Dr. Henry Cloud, Trust. I'm struggling with something. You've got all 4 of these things, but man, I got to be completely honest with you, Ewan. The 5th one is track record, brother. You seem like a good guy. You seem like a good character. But man, this reminds me of the Ponzi scheme. You know, you heard of Bernie Madoff? Yeah, man. Everybody trusted him. He had a good, ability, character. He had a good track record, but he lacked motive. His motive was to steal from people. I'm struggling here, man.
Yeah.
But what you did is you said, because I was able to bring this up because I did the dark work behind the scenes and I was able to be aware of this and bring this to your attention. You're like, man, this guy, right, has leveled me up. And that's what we're all about. Now you've laid out a game plan. Now the trust has gone up a little bit on that essential. Okay, 100% money back. He's laid a game plan. What about the contract? What about an agreement? He's done all these things. He still doesn't have a track record. Do I want to go through that headache and heartache?
Yeah.
And now my decision, right? That's the whole point, is going from a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being like, this guy has fully executed all essentials of the trust. Then I'm at 95%. Well, then you've mitigated, you have hedged your risk. That's my point.
You have enough information to know that if this does go south, it's going to be handled well.
100%.
Right? Because that's probably the best you could do with trust, because no matter how much you trust someone, if everything, like you say, if it all goes terrible, what's going to happen then? That's what I really want to know. That's what I want to know.
Well, but that's where this is important.
Different track record.
That's where his track record. See, that's the problem. It's never happened before. So you don't know. So there's a sense of lack of trust there, right?
Yep, totally.
So it won't allow you to fully trust this guy because there's no track record when the things do go south. He can have all these things in a place, but we hear stories all the time of contractors, business people just rolling out, going out of the country, leaving, right? Yeah. Then what? Then you're screwed because you didn't follow.
I wouldn't trust myself because I've never done it before, right? So no matter, my intention, right, my trust in that I will do everything in my power, pull out all the stops, no matter what, that this will go well. But I still would have a sense of doubt because I've never done it before, right? But that's why I put even more into it, as opposed to someone that's worked at a pool company for 10 years. He's been doing it every day, 3,000 days worth of doing pools. He knows the ins and outs. He knows the best materials. He knows all the suppliers. He's got a track record of sorts, right? And then he goes to, imagine I did that. Then I come to you like, hey, I'm going to do my own pool for you, right? I've got 10 years worth of experience of building pools. I would really trust myself at that point. No, I know this is going to be the best pool in the world. Right now, I've never done one, so I don't, so it would be, someone's confidence in themselves when they have a track record. You can feel it, right? You can tell. A lot of people can fake it, but if you have the track record, that's the verification portion, right? Trust but verify. Yeah. I trust him, and I can check and see, this guy's he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a balance, man. And like you said, like we talked about, wrapping things up here, it's extreme ownership, right? And accepting full responsibility
Mm,
for whatever happens, like it's on you,
yeah,
And to me, it's like that's how I live my life is and it's all evolved around trust, right? It's like me and you in this partnership. I trust you in showing up. I entrust you in saying the things that you say you're going to do. Is it all perfect and all rainbows and sunshines? Absolutely not. Is there things that we can work on? Absolutely, right? And when I think about that and when I say that, the beautiful thing about it is, are we willing? Are we able? Do we meet some of these? And how can we level up? And how can we each other as a partner be a role model for each other?
yeah.
See, that can be in our spouse, that can be in our kids. How can we be a role model? Your kids, they don't have a clue about any of this, right? They do
Mm,
to a certain degree, right? Kids know about a motive, they know about understanding, but my point here is it's the same thing as you as a parent and the kids and us as a partnership. How are we showing up for each other? Are we being a role model? Because maybe I struggle with one essential trust and then you struggle with another, but we lift each other up by being role models.
yeah, man. And just think about our episode we did on spouses as a partnership, like empathy and forgiveness, right? So if there's an area, okay, but what did we say about forgiveness? It's you can't continue to do the thing if you
Right.
messed it up, right?
Yes.
Now that's been talked about, and you can't expect that it might happen differently next time, but then that would be another level of forgiveness. What did Jesus say? How many times should I forgive my brother? They asked him 7 times, and he said no. 77 times 7 times.
Ooh.
That's how much you forgive him. And he didn't actually mean 77 times 7 because you could calculate that. What he meant by that was you always forgive, right? You
Mm.
always forgive, but you wouldn't allow someone to continue to abuse you, right? Like that's not what he's talking about there either, right? You would remove yourself from
Abuse
that
your trust.
trusting
Yeah.
relationship. There'd be a consequence for that person to continue to do that. So yeah, I think that's it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful,
man.
man.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, brother. I'm glad you read the book, man. I'm going to read it myself. I'm going to add it to the list. I've got like 12 books I'm trying to get through. But yeah, level up and live, brother. Any last words?
Yeah, we'll put I'll put this link in the show notes. So just
Perfect.
for anybody for easy access, so they can go click on it. I think I ordered off of Amazon. And when I first initially thought like, oh, trust, but then I was like, it's just gonna go over the generic trust, right? Well, lo and behold, when I'm diving deep on this, I couldn't put the book down, right? Because it dives deep. So I know today we just kind of covered the 5 essentials. If you want more in depth on this and stories that will, trust me, well, I say trust me, right?
Well, people do trust you if they're listening. If they've been around for a while, they know
uh,
they can trust you.
then you'll be able to resonate and apply yourself in how it shows up in your own life. Which that to me, that's where the magic happens. Is when you hear and you make note and then you go apply it in your own life. That's how we show up differently. That's how we become the best version of ourselves. And yeah, man, it's been
Amen to
fantastic.
that.
Level up and live.
Level up and live.
Thanks for tuning in to the Level Up and Live podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode on the 5 key essentials for building trust. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you have a friend whom you trust, be sure to share this episode with them to deepen that connection. Also, we'd love to hear what resonated with you from today's discussion by leaving us a review. And finally, check out the show notes for a link to Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Trust, for more insights on this important topic. Level up and live.